Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Soapbox Slam, where I get on my soapbox and I slam things that I see. So, I just recently went to the movies to see the movie Color Purple. And I'm getting on my soapbox today to talk about this film, The Color Purple, from my perspective. And I want to start out with just some preliminary information, right? The Color Purple was originally based on a novel written by Alice Walker. Okay, she won the Pulitzer Prize for this particular novel, and she published a total of 17 novels, short stories, essays, nonfictions, and poetries. She's about 79 years old, and she was born February 9th, 1944. I think that makes her an Aquarius. She was educated at Spelman College. She was married and divorced twice to two men, and then partnered with the singer Tracy Chapman. So yes, that means Alice Walker was a lesbian. And I don't even want to say lesbian because clearly she's bisexual, because she's been with men and women, and she has the capacity to love both a man and the capacity to love a woman. And it's actually evident why perhaps she may have the capacity to love a woman in her writing. I think that a lot of her writing, from my perspective, reveals where and why some women may choose to love other women. And it's not to get in a sexual debate about sexuality as a choice or born that way. I'm not going to get into that debate. That's a totally different soapbox, one that I'm willing to have, but not particularly for this soapbox slam about The Color Purple and the author Alice Walker. I'm just merely stating that in her writings, she reveals how the bond between women and women supporting each other and needing to feel loved and needing to feel desired and needing to feel supported can create a certain intimacy beyond just friendship, but shown and shared in a sexual manner. And I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that with women. And unfortunately, I don't think there's anything wrong with that with men. Because men also need the same feeling of reassurance and building and confidence and things like that. Maybe not as much or as often, or maybe as much or as often, or just as much as a female would need it. And I think it's a human condition. And so, I think it's quite normal as far as human behavior in my mind. So it makes sense to me watching The Color Purple and knowing the other writings that she has created, where she would expound on same-sex expression. I'm not going to call it bisexuality. I'm not going to call it homosexuality. I'm not going to call it lesbianism. I'm not going to call it anything like that. What I'm going to say is same-sex sexual expression. And sometimes I feel that human beings need that. So that's her being partnered with Tracy Chapman. And then she was born in 1944. So and in the South. So clearly, she was born in Jim Crow segregation. Also, I want to note that Alison Walker's books have been banned by places like Florida, Texas. It's a part of these book bans, and her books are labeled LGBTQAI plus books. And also, it's not just because of her books. that she's also banned. But Alice Walker has always been an advocate and protest injustices that she's seen around the world, and including long before this recent Hamas Israel war, she has protested Palestine and Israel Zionism long before this recent October 7th, 2023 debacle. She has protested this long in the past, as well as other things like apartheid in South Africa and things like that. So she is banned not just because of her sexuality, but because of her position of equality among people, human beings. And she is criticized and banned for that and attacked for that. And that's who Alice Walker is, the author of The Color Purple, and she won the Pulitzer Prize for that. The Color Purple was made into a movie based on the novel in 1985 by director Steven Spielberg, right? It casted an all-star cast of people like Oprah Winfrey, who was not necessarily who she is today, Oprah Winfrey, when she was casted, but Oprah Winfrey, Whoopi Goldberg, Danny Glover, Lawrence Fishburne, and the musical score was created by Quincy Jones, right? So that was the 1985 cast of The Color Purple. The Color Purple being a novel based on Alice Walker's work. Alice Walker, who won the Pulitzer Prize for this particular novel. There was a remake just recently done and released in December, titled The Color Purple as well. I will say the 1985 version is more deemed certainly a drama, right? It is a drama movie. It's in the genre drama, and it is a movie, I'll get to the drama and the context of the movie in a second, but then the 2023 version of The Color Purple is certainly a musical. It's not the drama that you saw done by Steven Spielberg. I will note that while there is other directors, Steven Spielberg also co-produced this or co-directed this, executive produced this, as well as Whoopi Goldberg and Quincy Jones. Not Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey and Quincy Jones. So, you know, they stapled their names to this musical 2023 version of The Color Purple. You know, the director, Samuel Bazamalu, I'm sorry for butchering this last name. He is a Guyanan director, and I apologize truly for not being able to pronounce your last name properly. That is no disrespect. That is just my own ignorance, and I apologize for it. I would love to know and hear you say your name so that I would never get that wrong again. Having said that, I apologize. You know, it stars Hailey Bailey, the young lady who played in The Little Mermaid, Taraji P. Henson, Louis Gossett Jr. So the cast is quasi all-starred, but not quite as all-starred as the 1985 version. And I would note, and I would have comments about that as well, that the other cast members, the people who played like Sophia or whatever else, was kind of a newcomer. I think her name was Daniela. Gorgeous woman. I mean, a gorgeous dark-skinned woman. I mean, please, if you had it in you and the kindness, give me a baby. As beautiful as you are, give me a baby girl, because you look good. All right, you look good. Miss Sophia, who played in the 2023 version, you look good, girl. You look good. Give me a baby. For real, for real, for real. You ain't even got to take care of it. I'll take care of it. I don't. Just give me a baby, because you look that good, right? I mean, just give me a baby. That's how good you look, girl. I'm proud of you. Do your thing. You did a very good job. You did a very good job in the role. Now, I have some serious criticisms to you, and I'll get to those criticisms as I talked about the 2023 version film a little bit later. But aside from that, I do not mean to demean you. I do not mean to disrespect you, but you are a beautiful, dark-skinned woman, full-figured, everything. I mean, just beautiful. You seduced the fuck out of me. That's all I would say. So kudos to you, beautiful woman. And then the music was composed by three people: Stephen Bray, Brenda Russell, and Chris Bauer. I believe I got that right. And yes, the 2023 version is a musical. The 1985 version is a drama. And it's very clearly distinctual and defined, right? So, just some tidbits. I mean, we all know Steven Spielberg's catalog, right? His cinemagraph or whatever the word is. We all know what he's done, right? Steven Spielberg is a master when it comes to directing movies and creating great movies, right? I mean, his catalog is off the charts, right? Like, we love stuff that he's done. And I can't say that I love all of the stuff that he's done, but his catalog is so extensive and so fantastic that you trust his work, right? And I would say that, yes, for the most part, absolutely that is true. His 1985 drama version of this book by Alice Walker, The Color Purple, I would say was casted well. The camera angles and cinematography for that time was fantastic. I mean, it's beautifully done. You really cannot complain about what is articulated in the movie or how the movie is articulated, the vision, all of that, right? It's top notch. It's classic Steven Spielberg, right? I am not a fan of Steven Spielberg's work when it comes to doing serious dramas about events that may or may not be true in history, right? I couldn't stand Schindler's List. I have reserved my comments about The Color Purple, but I really don't enjoy The Color Purple. I don't enjoy Zeffirelli's version of Jesus of Nazareth, right? I don't enjoy Mel Gibson's versions of the Passion of Christ. Not because I think it's a horribly done movie, right? I think these works are phenomenal movies. I own all of them, right? I came out my pocket to purchase these works because, as far as a film and creation and a story articulated and as a visual effect, or a story articulated through vision, it's top-notch beautiful. I mean, each one of these, Zeffirelli, Spielberg, all of these people I've mentioned, Mel Gibson and Passion of Christ, I mean, the work is phenomenal. I am not disputing that whatsoever. And even the work that's done in the 2023 version of The Color Purple, the work is phenomenal. I mean, it is top-notch work. You earned your pay for the work that you did, and it's top-notch. I mean, the cinematography in the 2023 version of The Color Purple is beautiful. I mean, some of the shots, the dancing in front of the waterfall, the water, the angle on those, and how it's framed, it's beautiful. The lighting that's coming in on that and everything else, whether that was done on location or if that was done by green screen, regardless, the work is phenomenal. It's a beautiful shot. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful shot. The beautiful shot of Sophia storming through the cornfields to confront Celie is a beautiful shot. I mean, you cannot dispute that camera work, right? So in the Passion of Christ, I mean, the shots of Jesus Christ being abused and whipped and stripped of his humanity, as I struggle to say it, the visual effect of that was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, right? So I am not disputing the work as far as how it is articulated and everything else. But it's the subject matter that I struggle the most with. And I just could not sit through 3 hours of Steven Spielberg telling the story of how human beings were exterminated. I just cannot stomach that. Not because that happened to a God's chosen people, right? Not because I feel so much more empathy and give that a pass that I could not watch it, right? That's not my motivation behind that. It's the fact that there are human beings just like any other human being, and the fact that we as people can do this to another people, that agonizes my soul. And to watch it creates a level of agony and disdain within my heart that I just cannot bear. And the same thing is something that I've said for years about watching black films today. I can't watch 12 Years a Slave. I can't watch, whatever it was that Lupita Domingo won her Oscar for. I forget the name of that film. I can't watch Will Smith in Emancipation. I can't watch this stuff. I could barely watch Roots. Thank God Roots had enough of other stories behind it that it wasn't rooted in the constant abuse of human beings, particularly black human beings. So therefore, I see that as abuse to me. I can't. I can't watch it anymore. I can't endure it anymore. I can't. It's not anything I can do or tolerate or anything like that. Like, it inside my soul hurts so much more to observe someone being their back torn apart, or spit on, or raped, or any of those things. I just cannot watch it. I can't relate to that. I don't want to relate that. I don't want to be reminded of that. I know what it is. I already know what it is. My spirit and everything else through history knows what that is. I don't need to be reminded. Maybe other people really need to be reminded of how horrible that is. The way people act today, and the disgusting behavior of people, and their gotta win, gotta get over, gotta get back attitude, and everything else. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they need to be reminded of that, and therefore we produce movies like this. But to me, it does no service, and it doesn't paint. It paints us as constant victims, and I think that's a problem that some groups suffer from in the world today, is always being a victim. And because they're a victim, it entitles them to behave ungodly. And I hate to make it religious, like, oh, I'm some big Bible thumping, God loving whatever. I am God fearing, but I'm more spiritual loving than just God, monotheistic Abrahamic religion God. So that's that. So I digress. Let me get back to, the details of The Color Purple. First and foremost, I would say I was never a fan of the 1985 drama done by Steven Spielberg. And don't misinterpret me not being a fan of the films, the current 2023 version or the 1985 version. Do not misinterpret me not being a fan of these films as indictment or critique on Alice Walker. Quite the opposite. I love that woman. I love the fact that she created this book. Also, tangentially, I will also say, I did mention that she has been book banned. Her books, this movie, this book, and things like that are banned from Florida and some of these other states that are trying to get rid of LGBTQAI plus books and things like that. And I will reiterate about that topic as well. But do not take my criticism of the 1985 film or my criticism of the 2023 film as an indictment on Alice Walker and her novel. Quite the opposite. I find her novel and this particular story necessary and beautiful, and I am thankful and gifted that she wrote this, right? I believe that in my heart of hearts, right? So this is not an indictment on the novel The Color Purple or Alice Walker for writing it whatsoever. But my problem with the film and the story in general is, number one, as a black male who didn't have a model father, and then to watch this film and see other black men behave in ways that to me are detestable, really made it difficult as a young child for me to accept that film and that premise, right? I'd already struggled with issues of my own father's modeled behavior and who he was, and then to watch another film and constantly hear in history and things like that, constant reminders of less than desirable behavior from black men. And so it was very difficult for me to want to relate to a film that to me seemed to bash men in a way, black men in a way that made it appear as though black men were horrible people and did horrible things, right? I mean, the suffrage of this film, I mean, it's constant violence of a particular character, Celie, but also Sophia. The constant violence, the constant subjugation and abuse from men on Celie, the main character, who was played by Whoopi Goldberg in 1985 and is played by Fantasia Barrister or whatever else, the singer who won American Idol. She plays Celie in the 2023 musical version, and the subjugation, the abuse, the constant denigration of their human existence, not just their existence as a woman, but their existence as a human being, to me is not something I want to watch. I don't endorse, support, believe in people treating people that way. I can't stand to watch The Real Housewives of Atlanta because of the ratchet behavior, constant fighting and pettiness that goes on in reality television, whether it's Housewives of Atlanta or Housewives of some city in this country. I mean, I think it's embarrassing that this is how women opt to behave. I mean, really? Like, this is your behavior, and you call yourselves rich and of a certain ilk? I can tell you one thing: New Money or whatever else, you ain't nothing but a one generation above white trash. And I can tell you another thing, and I know this from the depths of my core: you certainly are not old money or anything aristocratic at all. By no means behaving in that way. So your truest sense of bourgeoisie behavior is is detestable, from my opinion. So, as I stated earlier, it was very difficult for me to relate as a young child, and even to this day, going back and watching the 1985 version of The Color Purple, written by Alice Walker and produced and directed by Steven Spielberg with an all-star cast. It was difficult to watch and relate that at any age in my life, today or back then. I did not enjoy seeing men do that. Now, did every man in that film and in her story behave the way the father, Mr. and Mr.'s dad, and even Celie's own dad, who, you know, was raping her, impregnating her, and stealing her children from her, you know, and all of her life she thought that this was her own father. I mean, she learns in the very end, okay, it's not her own father, it's a stepfather who did this. But nonetheless, he is the adult figure and she is a child figure, and he just took what he wanted from her, and he trained her to think that that was okay, conditioned her, groomed her to think that that was okay, and a mentality and generation of beautiful black women who have been conditioned this way by men, and not just black men, but white men who did this to them too, to me is not something to celebrate yes, we celebrate, and the book aims to celebrate her perseverance, but she shouldn't have to have that perseverance as a human being. Her perseverance should not be related to having to deal with subjugation, violence, abuse from men. Her perseverance should be more focused on learning a skill, and that skill and trade perpetuating her into wealth or something like that, or combating, combating a system that says she can't do something because of her color, and then not only doing it among her own people, but crossing over into a group of people who automatically view her something because of her skin tone, right? That to me is a more romantic perseverance than the perseverance of complete subjugation, violence, and sexual mental abuse, right? So we learn in the original version, the drama version of The Color Purple, we learn that, okay, and I said earlier, there were redeemable male characters in her novel. I mean, Harpo is a fairly decent man. I mean, given the time, given the conditions and everything else, he loves Sophia. Her defiance is not something he's used to, because no woman would have defied his father. But, he loved her strength. He loved her confidence. He loved her initiative. I mean, he had his own initiatives and dreams. I mean, he created the Sugar Shack, or the Shake Shack, or the whatever the shack was that was in the back, the juke, whatever it was, that Suge came to sing at and created. I mean, he created a bar, made a lot of money at his bar. I mean, he was entrepreneurial and enterprising, right? And he suffered the conditioning, that his father wanted him to be like him and abuse women and take that on. And he didn't necessarily believe that, but he thought that because society told him that this is what a man is supposed to do to his woman, and granddad and dad, he tried to do that to his woman, and she smacked that shit down. Nah. And that's the Sophia character, the Oprah Winfrey character. And then in the 2023 version, I think her name is Daniela, this beautiful dark-skinned, full-figure woman who, again, girl, you could have my babies. You're so beautiful. Like, you would give me some beautiful children. And that is real. Like, if you ever saw this video and wanted to take me up on that offer, let's do it. Like, that's how beautiful I find you, as a full-figured, dark-skinned black woman. I just think you're gorgeous. So aside from that, back onto this topic, 1985 version, drama version of The Color Purple. So I always struggled with it because of its depiction. I don't want to say because of its depiction of men, and I don't want to point to Alice Walker and say, shame on Alice Walker for writing this. Quite the contrary. I am proud that she wrote this, and I feel saddened and feel it's so unfortunate that something like this was so prevalent during that time. I mean, her story is not nuanced or fictional. I mean, we know for sure that Alice Walker endured this type of treatment. We know that Oprah Winfrey endured this type of treatment. We know that Whoopi Goldberg endured this type of treatment. We know that Maya Angelou endured this type of treatment. So, when you listen to these backstories of those women that I just mentioned, you learn and hear how they also have endured this subjugation, molestation, rape, and complete violence that men have done to them, black men have done to them, not to mention some of the white men who have done this to them as well. So and all down in the South. Now, I'm not to say the South is guilty of just this, right? The North is just as guilty. I mean, it's prevalent everywhere. I mean, we people who from the North want to sit back and tout how we were on the right side of it, and we were the North, and we didn't enslave people. No, you don't get a pass. No, I mean, that nice try. It would have worked years ago, but the North was just as nasty to a group of people that they viewed as second-class citizens, and they were just as nasty as the South. It just wasn't as insidious and blatant. I mean, it was more insidious, not as blatant as what the South was. And sometimes I wonder, is it easier to deal with something that's blatant because you know what you're getting in the South, or the blindside hit that you get from the North people from the North, where it's totally unexpected. But that's a totally different topic that I'm not going to get on right now, right? I want to talk about The Color Purple and the feelings I've had towards this film. So I never really enjoyed the version by Steven Spielberg in 1985. I don't like how it depicted men, but that's not a critique on Alice Walker, and that's my point. It's not a critique on Alice Walker in writing the book. I'm glad she revealed this common thread that occurred with black men at that particular time. I mean, in 1944, we're looking at 60 years after slavery, right? So certainly the elderly who were enslaved were still alive. Some people, I mean, you're at a crossover period where you've got people who were enslaved, and then new generation people who have never endured slavery but are certainly enduring subjugation as a black person. And the thing that I find most interesting is that for a group of people to be subjugated and violanced, particularly the black men and black women, I'm not excluding black women, but a group of people who were subjugated and abused physically, mentally, in every form by a different group of white people, it behooves me to understand how it is that they could redo the exact same thing. And that's what black men did. They executed everything that they learned by being subjugated to white masters and on plantations and subjugated by slavery and ownership. And they turned around and did it. They took what was done to them and they turned around and did it to our black women. And I find that very hard to understand how anybody who is empathetic or compassionate or a human being, how they can't see the same thing being done over again. And I've talked about this in other films. I don't understand how slavery can even exist. The Hebrews were treated this way by the Egyptians, and yet we still throughout history, even now to this day, implement slavery. And yet we never learned the lesson from the Hebrews, right? How can this still go on? How can we as human beings, have so much compassion for the Hebrews who were enslaved by the Egyptians and were delivered from that? How can we as human beings know this story, especially in the three Abrahamic religions, know that story and then still turn around and do the exact same thing for centuries later? I mean, it might be, it's not excusable, but it might be understandable if you go into, the Anglo-Saxon Norse gods and things like that, where they didn't necessarily have a story like, the Hebrews leaving Egypt or anything like that. I mean, they certainly conquered and were barbaric and conquered other groups and tribes and enslaved people and enslaved women and everything else. But I don't accept that this is just human behavior, so let's accept it, and that the survival of the fittest is always going to win, and that's I just don't accept that. You put my back against the wall, yeah, I'm going to do what I need to do to survive, but I'm certainly not going to rape another. If I have to take over another tribe, I'm not going to rape their women just to reinstill my authority. And I think that there's a certain point of, you as human beings and being the winner and surviving. There's still a point when you treat the other human being with a sense of dignity and respect. You're just the stronger force, and you make them say uncle. And once they say uncle, it's done. But I don't think you go beyond making them say uncle. So I'll go back to, these men 60 years after slavery turned around and implemented everything that was done to them to women, because they had the authority and power to. And I will say that, not just black women, but even in the white cultures and other cultures, women at this time were subjugated in such a way. And I think that's, the adage or saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? You make a woman completely dependent upon a man, and most men, time and time again, literally, not even clichely, or that's not even a word, but not even as a cliche, literally, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And literally, time has told us over and over and over again that given that much power, man will abuse woman because he's done it for eons. Likewise, it occurred as far as the Hebrews and the Egyptians, and it still occurs. I mean, the absolute subjugation that still occurs in Orthodox Judaism, the absolute subjugation that still occurs in absolute Orthodox Muslim religions. I mean, there is still this absolute power over women in society, and I believe that there are some people, even in American society, that would still endorse or support that type of absolute subjugation of women today in America. That's a totally different topic, and I think there are some advantages and disadvantages to women and women in the workforce, women in roles other than a nurturing role. I'm not getting on a chauvinistic discussion right now about that, but I do have opinions about that type of stuff, and it's for another soapbox. But I'm back to The Color Purple and redirecting. So I always struggled from the very beginning to watch this movie. I think one of the beautiful messages of this movie, The Color Purple, and something that I think is very clear, and from my perspective, the only redeeming quality about the entire movie in itself is the strength and solidarity of women, right? That they can identify within each other the need for support and love, and to build each other up, and to be there for each other, because certainly the men weren't doing it, and they were out on their own. I mean, in the 2023 version, in the 1985 version, Celie goes and supports Sophia when Sophia is brutally beaten by a white woman and her henchmen, because Sophia didn't want to go work for the white woman. How dare a black person tell a white person no? Or how dare a black person correct a white person, right? And so they had to beat Sophia into submission, and boy, did they do it. I mean, they beat that woman, played by Oprah Winfrey in 1985. They beat her to a bloody pulp and stole her spirit and broke her. And that was the intent. That's the whole concept of abuse and everything else, is to break the person so that they would know not to do that again. It's a form of a mental and physical abuse. Its entire inception is to break that person's spirit. And some people's spirit break from it, and some people can be more resilient. Ultimately, in the end, Sophia becomes resilient, and even though she endured that and they tried to break her, she put herself back together. And it wasn't just her who put herself back together, and that's the point I make about this, the strength of women and support and everything else. It helped Sophia to have Celie help her put herself back together. This interconnective energy between the women and building each other up and helping each other put each other back together when they were constantly being broken by men, is what is a beautiful message in the story. And I don't just take it as just women putting each other back together and supporting each other and everything else, right? Because I believe in true gender roles and true gender identities. I believe in that. I really do. But the need to put each other back together is not just a woman thing. Men need to learn to help put men back together too, because there are a lot of men, especially in the African American community, who are broken. They're seriously broken, and they may need another man to help them put them together more than a woman could put them together. And that's the honest to God truth. We have glorified these women putting each other back together, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. But human beings need help being put back together, and sometimes it comes from your same sex, and sometimes it comes from the opposite sex. But we in our society have delineated and separated this, and I would certainly say that African American women, particularly of this time in this story, some of my aunts on my father's side, I can see it when I look at them. They put each other back together. and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad that they have each other to do that. I think black men need to learn to put each other back together as well, because it's something that the black women have figured out. And if it's novels like this that help them do it, that in itself is a reason why Alice Walker not only should have won her Pulitzer Prize, but also why her novels should not be banned from places like Florida and Texas and some of these other places. Now, I will address one issue about the ban, right? I asked a bunch of people, and I've talked about this with friends and things like this before I did the Soapbox, right? And I do not think, as some of my other friends, I don't know how appropriate this would be for junior high people, right? Junior high students. The human brain isn't done developing until age 28, right? So, I mean, I don't have kids. Hopefully God will bless me with them, and I'm working on it. But I would tell my children, and I do tell my friends who do have kids and everything else, that the human brain isn't done developing until between 28 and 30, right? 25, 30, 28, and 30. I don't care that you are 18 and graduated high school and you can get a job or you can go to college. I don't care. Your brain isn't done developing. It's not. There's no scientific way around it. The brain, the skull is completely done fusing together. The movements and growth of the brain, it isn't done until between the ages 25 and 30. What the heck do you know at 18, 21 about love? Especially when your brain isn't done developing. So the different layers and contexts of how relationships have worked and the importance of making relationships work, the efforts it takes, the layers as to why power structures, why things work, why things don't work, how to get along, all this stuff. You're not physically capable. Your brain isn't done developing to really understand that. So having said that, do I think it's appropriate for a junior high student to read a book like that, especially these generations today and younger generations? Because while they are maybe advanced technologically and social issues and everything else, the maturation levels and things like that, I can't really give them that much credit for. And so, I do not know that I could say it's a completely appropriate to instate as like regular curriculum reading for junior high kids. That is something to debate about, right? That is something to talk about. That is something to consider. But to ban it as if it were some sort of demonized book that should be burned, which is what people have done, like it's some sort of Salem witch project or something like that, which is what Ron DeSantis has done, and it's how he diminishes and devalues groups and everything else. Instead of getting on the stage and talking about the book, Alice Walker, because this is someone who he has banned, and her books, right? Instead of just giving some sort of blanket ban on her books and everything else, why doesn't he start the discussion on the responsibility of reading a book like this and the importance of where this book does need to be discussed with adults, if they're going to engage, if the child is going to engage and read it, that they should read it, but only under the influence or the parental guidance, right? I mean, but no, that's not his approach. His approach is only to devalue and demean a certain group of people. Because if it wasn't for that purpose, he would have stated that very clearly, and he doesn't. He never stated his intention, other than this is a dirty evil that infiltrated Florida land. Ooh. That's how he talks, that's how he behaves, that's the kind of man that he is. And it's ignorant. So this isn't necessarily a book that I think should be a part of necessarily curriculum. Should it be banned? No, absolutely not. There's too much richness in the history and of people to try and ban it. And the issue to me with this is it requires a more sophisticated level of discussion in order to introduce to a high school kid, let alone junior high, And so yes, the subject matter in this is intense, and it requires assistance in order to understand, especially for younger generations, right? So this 1985 version, I wasn't always a fan of. However, it was well executed and everything else, you know. So yeah, that's the 1985 version, right? So let me get to the 2023 version, which is the whole reason why I did this post, and I'm going to wrap this up after I talk about the 2023 version. To me, the biggest takeaway for the 2023 version deals with the execution of people's jobs to make a movie. And what do I mean by that? The cinematography is phenomenal. The choreography is phenomenal. The musical score is top notch. It should hands down absolutely win an Oscar for its musical score. Absolutely. The music that was created and sung in this is top notch. I mean, it's not a remake of all the music is, not all of it, but I would say 90% of the music in there is totally redone and new music compared to what was done in the 1985 version. Excuse me. So musically, top notch. Costume, I mean, shouldn't necessarily. It's not. Costume is not top notch. It's less than luxurious, or less than. It wasn't top notch. I mean, costume. I think the costume in the 1985 version was probably, to me, better than the costume in this particular version. Just my opinion. But all the other aspects of the film and the creators and the workers of the film, absolutely, except the actors. And so what I have a problem with, right, is like with music or movies or anything like that, when you remake, and this was adapted from the play version, the Broadway version, which is also a musical, and it was made into a movie, right? So it's a musical now. Great, staple in history. But my criticism of anything that is a remake, that is something that's already been done, is that if you're going to remake something, you probably better spend a lot more time distinguishing it from the original. Clear distinctions, clear, absolute, almost 380 separations from the original, right? One of the only films that I've ever seen where the words themselves were exactly the same, but the entire production and presentation was so uniquely different that you never even paid attention to the words because you already know the words, right? And that film was also, I mentioned this director earlier. His name was Zeffirelli. He created, I believe it was either Jesus of Nazareth or King of Kings. But he also made Romeo and Juliet, the black and white version everyone always talks about, right? Zeffirelli did Romeo and Juliet. A more recent version was done in, I think it was late 90s, early 2000s. Leonardo DiCaprio was in this version, and I wish I could tell you the director. I want to say is Paul Hedges, but I could be wrong about that. I can't remember who did that. Maybe it was hell, it could have even been oh god, the guy who did Pulp Fiction. It might have even been him. I can't remember, but I don't think it was him. I have to look this up. The director from the more recent version of Romeo and Juliet that starred Leonardo DiCaprio. And what I'm talking about here is that is one of the only films in history that I have seen where word for word everything was the same, but because he changed the entire set production, costume, props, I mean, everything else was changed, and it was changed so much that since we all knew the words, we really didn't need the words. We were more infatuated with the visual effect of everything, right? And that was a brilliant, brilliant production of the movie, right? It's very successful. You took a remake, you took something else, you remade it, and you did exactly what the word remake means, right? You completely remade that film. Phenomenal. That's the only one. There was a great film, Still Magnolias, which was also done in by an all-black cast, and it was horrible. Not because the all-black cast wasn't up to task, but the all-black cast, the actors, didn't bring anything new to the character. All they did was prove that they can remember and regurgitate what they saw the other actors do. It was horrible. It's not creative. It shows no acting talent. It was horrible. And a lot of things that have been remade, there no effort is made into coaching the actors to do something different and unique to the character, to redo the entire character, bring the character to life and make them their own, and everything else. No. So dialogue, there's nothing done to the dialogue to readdress it or repurpose it, or say the same thing but in a different way, right? And it's just to me that falls short and becomes a big turnoff and when you're watching it. A perfect example, Oprah Winfrey had this magnificent scene that they always show where she's stomping through the field, hands swinging, stomping her feet, swinging through the fields, and she's going to address Celie because Celie told Harpo to beat her, right? And she's going to go confront Celie, and she's stomping through the field. Well, in this 2023 version, they did the exact same thing. Now, this woman, I told you, I've said it a million times, this woman is so beautiful, she can have my babies. Like, this is not a critique on her because she's a big black woman or anything like that, right? I find this woman gorgeous, who played Sophia, the Oprah Winfrey character. But what they did to her in 2023 is they made her do the exact same thing that Oprah Winfrey did. And I think that did a huge disservice to this girl, Danielle, or whatever her name is, this girl who played the role, Sophia. Why? Oprah Winfrey made that iconic. You want to make yourself a phenomenal character, right? You're bringing this character to life again, Sophia. Why did you have to completely mimic everything? Because it was just a mimic job. It wasn't even acting. You mimicked everything that Oprah already did. And any director that encouraged you to do that, shame on you. You should have directed and got more out of her. That's her job as an actress, right? Help her to do a different creative thing. Maybe she should have walked over there with her hands in her hip and swing her hips, walk with her hips switching real hard, or something like a completely different walk, but also still suggesting that she's in charge and powerful. Or maybe she should have walked right over there, and when she got in front of her, she put her hands on her hips and throws her leg out like Angelina Jolie did when she announced the Oscars and everything else, right? Like, she could have done something else to show that she is a strong woman, and she was about to confront another woman for telling telling her husband to beat her, right? This is what acting is about. And I think the same mistake occurred when Steven Spielberg redid the movie West Side Stories. Every actor, beautiful cinematography, beautiful artwork, beautiful execution of everything, except for the actors. All they did was copy everything that they saw. I mean, the new Anita had to roll her R's the way the old Anita did, Rita Moreno, right? So she's over here, America. That was unique to Rita Moreno, right? That was her uniqueness and what she brought to the character Anita in West Side Stories. The girl who played Anita in the Steven Spielberg's version of the West Side Story did the exact same thing to the T that Rita Moreno did. So everything was just mimicked. That's not acting. That is not acting. And unfortunately, we're talking about The Color Purple. Some of the biggest letdowns for me were to watch these actors not bring these characters to life, but just simply mimic everything they saw in the drama. And it was obvious. And for me, for that reason, this 2023 version fell short because the acting was not creative. It was pure mimicking. It wasn't even acting. It was mimicking. All they did was mimic. They're lucky they had some musical scores to sing that they can make their own and put their own stamp on the music. That's their only saving grace. And that is the only saving grace to the film, is the music is good. The music is very good. But every scene that was pivotal to the drama in the movie, and every scene that was deemed pivotal out of the novel, was just simply mimicked. Mr. did everything that Danny Glover did, right? Down to how he walked and everything else. He just mimicked what Danny Glover did. A more talented creative actor would have done something different. I would have probably chose less of my stomping around and everything else and more of my silence authority. I would have brought silence and authority to that character and made him such a silent, dirty look to everything and show his power through silence. He could have been way more powerful and changed the character and did a totally different message if he did everything as a man who never had to yell and everything else. All he had to do was be silent and give the dirtiest, sternest look. And you knew what that man was going to do. So that you didn't have to see him mimic what Danny Glover did. Because that's what makes it very difficult to watch. The subjugation, don't get me wrong, that is not an indictment on The Color Purple. It's more of an indictment of me, because whether it's The Color Purple or The Passion of Christ or Prince of Egypt or 10 Commandments or 12 Years a Slave or anything. It could be a movie about police brutality, American Son, which was on a Netflix special played by Kerry Washington and a white man, and it was based on a play, and it's on Netflix. It's based on a play. I wish I had seen the play, but it was well done for the screen, and to stomach the abuse and witness that is very hard for me as a human being to watch how human beings still do this to other human beings. I really dream and aspire to something way more enlightened out of human behavior. I just think that that's where we should all be and where we should all be going. So that's kind of my thing about The Color Purple. As far as the 2023 version, all of the subject, everything else is word for word the same. The subject matter is still the same. All of that is still the same. And I already stated how I felt about that in watching the drama of 1985 by Steven Spielberg. The fact that this was a musical is the only saving grace, because everything else was done the exact same. So I can't even give credit to the actors, because they were forced or chose to mimic the exact same behaviors. There wasn't any acting really involved. It was just pure mimicking. The only real quote-unquote acting was when these actors got to sing and put their own thing on their singing, which they did. Again, the musical score is fantastic. They more than likely should win the Oscar for their musical score, because it's that good. The composition, the writing of it, the lyrics, all that, they're great. It's great. It's the only thing that pulls the movie through, and to me lessens the subjugation, violence, and brutality of the movie in itself and the subject matter in itself. Which, again, like I said before, it's Alice Walker, and I totally support Alice Walker and glad she wrote it. I personally just have a huge problem watching films that show the worst of humankind. And I know it exists, but I don't want to live there. So that's my take on The Color Purple. I do think that the musical is more appropriate for children, junior high people, more. I'm not saying 100% appropriate, but it is a lot more easy to stomach than watching the drama of 1985, which to me is exceptionally hard to watch, and certainly something that I would, as a parent or soon-to-be parent, I would only watch that with my child and have a discussion with them about it after the film was over. Whether you read the book or watch the 85 version or watch the 2023 version. It is something that needs to be discussed with your children if you choose to let them watch that. And it is something that I do think needs parental guidance on. And so, yeah, that's my take on it. The Color Purple, I support Black business and Black dollars, so I certainly was going to go see it regardless. I knew what was to come. As far as the subject matter and everything else, I just wanted to see what they were willing to do to put a different spin on it. And unfortunately, the only different spin that they did put on it was the musical aspect of it, and then location kind of cinematography of it. Other than that, it was mimicked, and I don't like mimicking. I like acting. And I keep seeing this with the younger generation, West Side Stories or The Color Purple, or there are a lot of things that have been done that are remakes, and these remakes are not unique in their own right. They're just completely remade, mimicking, in hopes to make $1 off of mimicking something in the past. And for that, it's unfortunate, and for that, I'm not a huge fan of. But that's The Color Purple. If you are interested in supporting Black dollars or Black films or whatever else, go see it just for that. Otherwise, I don't know if I don't know if I would say I would recommend it per se. There are a lot of great messages and strength stories that come out of it, out of the story, out of the novel, out of the two versions, 85 or 2023. I can tell you that Black sisterhood is a beautiful thing, and what these women do to support and bring each other up is a beautiful thing to watch and learn. So that's my slam. This was a long one. Thank you for bearing with me and hearing what I have to say. Okay, have a wonderful day.